Chapter 16. The skeleton is wrapped in a royal blue shawl. I sat in front of the computer with Dean beside me, scrolling from one picture to the next, my finger feeling heavier with each click. There's a long dead flower pressed into the bones of her left hand. The necklace is around her neck, the chain tangled in her rib cage. Empty sockets stared back at me from a skull devoid of human flesh. I stared at the contours, waiting for a spark of recognition, but all I felt was bile rising in the back of my throat. You removed the flesh from her bones. Forensic analysis suggested the removal had been done post-mortem, but that was cold comfort. You destroyed her. You eradicated her. Dean brought his hand to rest on the back of my neck. I'm here. I swallowed back the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. Once, twice, 3 times. And then I scrolled on to the next picture. There were dozens of them. Pictures of the dirt road on which she'd been buried. Pictures of the construction equipment that had uncovered a plain wooden casket. You wrapped her bones in a blanket. You buried her with flowers. You gave her a coffin. I forced myself to breathe and switched from the pictures to reading the official report. According to the medical examiner, there was a notch on the outside of one of her arm bones, a defensive wound where a knife had literally cut her to the bone. Laboratory results indicated that the bones had been treated with some kind of chemical prior to burial. That made the remains hard to date, but crime scene analysis put the time of burial within days of my mother's disappearance. You killed her, then you erased her. No skin on the bones, no hair on her head, nothing. Dean's fingers kneaded gently at the muscles at the back of my neck. I turned my gaze from the computer screen to him. What do you see? Care. Dean paused. Honor. Remorse. It was on the tip of my tongue to say that I didn't want to know if the killer had felt remorse. I didn't care that she'd mattered enough to him that he hadn't just flung her body down in some hole. You don't get to bury her. You don't get to honor her, you sick son of a bitch. Do you think she knew him? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. That's one explanation for what we're seeing, isn't it? He killed her in a frenzy and regretted it after the fact. The blood-spattered dressing room in my memory spoke of domination and anger, the burial site, as Dean had said, of honor and care. 2 sides of the same coin, and taken together, the suggestion was that this wasn't a random act of violence. You took her with you. I'd always known that my mother's killer had removed her from the room. Whether she was alive or dead when he'd done so, the police hadn't been able to say, though they'd known from day one that she'd lost enough blood that her chances of survival were next to non-existent. You took her because you needed her with you. You couldn't leave her behind for someone else to bury. He might have known her. Dean's voice brought me back to the present. I noticed that this once, with this case, he didn't use the word I. Or he might have watched her from afar and convinced himself that the interaction went both ways, that she knew he was watching, that he knew her the way no one else ever would. My mom had made her living as a psychic. Like me, she'd been good at reading people, good enough to convince them that she had a line to the other side. Did she do a reading for you? Did you go to one of her shows? I racked my memory, but it was a blur of faces in the crowd. My mother had done a lot of readings. She'd done a lot of shows. We'd moved around often enough that there was no point in forming connections. No friends, no family. No men in her life. Cassie, look at this. Dean drew my attention back to the screen. He zoomed in on one of the pictures of the coffin. There was a design etched into the surface of the wood. 7 small circles, forming a heptagon around what appeared to be a plus sign. Or, I thought, thinking about remorse and burial rituals and the monster who'd carved that symbol. A cross. Chapter 17. Sleep came for me in the dead of night. I dreamt of my mother's eyes, wide set and rimmed in liner that made them look almost impossibly large. I dreamt of the way she'd shooed me out of the dressing room that day. I dreamt of the blood and woke the next morning to something sticky dripping onto my forehead, one drop of liquid at a time. My eyes flew open. Leah stood over me, a straw in one hand and a can of soda in the other. She eased her finger off the top of the straw and let another drop of soda hit my forehead. I wiped it off and sat up, careful not to wake Dean, who lay beside me on the couch, still dressed in his clothes from the night before. Leah put the straw in her mouth and sucked the remaining liquid out before plopping it back down in her soda. Smirking, she eyed the sleeping Dean, then raised an eyebrow at me. When that failed to engender a response, she made a quiet tisking sound with her tongue. I stood up, which forced her to take a step back. "It's not what you think," I told her, my voice muted. Leah twirled the straw contemplatively in between her middle finger and her thumb. "So you two weren't up until the wee hours of the morning looking at the information on that drive Agent Sterling gave you? How did you—" Leah cut off the question by turning my still open laptop to face me. "Fascinating reading." I felt a sinking sensation deep in my gut. Leah knows. She read the file, and she knows. I waited for Leah to say something else about the files on that computer. She didn't. Instead, she strolled toward the bedroom she'd claimed as her own. After a long moment, I followed, just as she'd intended me to. We ended up out on the balcony. Leah closed the door behind us, then hopped up on the railing. We were 40 stories off the ground, and she sat there, perfectly balanced, staring me down. "What?" I said. "If you mention a word of what I'm about to tell you to Dean, I will disavow any knowledge of this conversation." Leah's tone was casual, but I believed every word of it. I braced myself for an attack. "You make him happy." Leah narrowed her eyes slightly. "As happy as Dean can be," she modified. "We'd have to ask Sloan for the exact numbers, but I'm estimating a 200% reduction in brooding since the two of you embarked on this thing of yours." Dean was Leah's family. If she had a choice between saving every other person on the face of the planet and saving Dean, she would choose Dean. She hopped off the railing and gripped my arm lightly. "I like you." Her grip tightened, as if she found that admission mildly distasteful to say. "I like you too," I almost said, but didn't want to chance that she'd see those words as a shade short of the truth. "I missed you," I said instead. The same words I'd said to Sloan. "You, Michael, Sloan, Dean, this is home." Leah looked at me for a moment. "Whatever," she said, pushing down any emotion my words had wrought with a graceful little shrug. "The point is that I don't hate you," she continued magnanimously. "So when I say that you need to put on your big girl panties and woman up, I mean that in the nicest possible way." "Excuse me?" I said, pulling my arm from her grasp. "You have mommy issues. I get it, Cassie. I get that this is hard, and I get that you have every right to deal with the whole body showing up thing in your own way and time. But fair or not, no one here has the emotional bandwidth to deal with the continuing woes of Cassie's murdered mother." I felt like she'd slammed the heel of her hand into my throat. But even as I weathered the blow, I knew Leah had said those words for a reason. "You're not cruel. Not like that." Sloan slipped 2 pairs of chopsticks into her sleeve last night at the end of the meal. Leah's statement confirmed my gut instinct. Not disposable ones, the nice ones they had on the table. In addition to being our resident statistician, Sloane was also our resident klepto. The last time I'd seen her take something, she'd been stressed out about a confrontation with the FBI. For Sloane, sticky fingers were a sign that her brain was short-circuiting with emotions she couldn't control. Let's call that Exhibit A, Leah suggested. Exhibit B would be Michael. Do you have any idea what kind of absolute mind warp going home is for him? I thought of the conversation I'd overheard between Leah and Michael the day before. Yes, I said, turning back to face Leah again. I do. There was a beat of silence as she processed the truth she heard in those words. You think you do, Leah said softly, but you couldn't. I heard you guys talking yesterday, I admitted. I expected Leah to have a knee-jerk reaction to those words, but she didn't. Once upon a time, she said, her voice even as she turned to stare out at the strip. Someone used to give me gifts for being a good girl, the way Michael gets gifts from his father. You might think you understand what's going on in Michael's head right now, but you don't. You can't profile this, Cassie. You can't puzzle it out. When she turned back to face me, the expression on her face was flippant. What I'm saying here is that Michael is about one downward spiral-induced bad decision away from eloping with a showgirl. And Sloane has been acting weird, even for Sloane, since we got here. We are officially at issue capacity, Cassie. So I'm sorry, but you don't get to be effed up right now. She tapped the tip of my nose with her finger. It's not your turn. Chapter 18. If Leah had done to Michael what she'd just done to me, he would have lashed back at her. If she'd done it to Sloane, Sloane would have been crushed, but I wasn't. Sooner or later, my grief would catch up to me, but Leah had given me a reason to fight it for that much longer. She wasn't wrong about Michael. She wasn't wrong about Sloane. Someone had to hold them together. Someone had to hold us together. And I needed that person to be me. My gut said Leah knew that. You could have been nicer about it, I thought. But if she had been, she wouldn't be Leah. I stayed out on the balcony for another 10 minutes after Leah sauntered off. When I finally made my way back inside, Michael, Leah, and Dean were gathered around the kitchen table, and so was Agent Briggs. He was dressed in plain clothes, which told me the FBI was making an effort at keeping these visits on the down low. The fact that Briggs's version of plain clothes still made him look like a cop was perfectly reflective of his personality, hyper-focused, ambitious. Briggs played to win. There's been another murder. Briggs had apparently been waiting for my arrival to make that announcement. None of the four of us made an attempt at looking surprised. That makes the Apex, the Wonderland, the Desert Rose, and the Majesty, all in a matter of 4 days. We may be looking at someone who has a grudge against the casinos, or the people who profit from them. Dean looked toward a file Briggs held in his hand. The latest victim? Briggs tossed the folder down onto the kitchen table. I flipped it open. Glassy blue eyes stared back at me, impossibly large in a heart-shaped face. Is that? Michael started to say. Camille Holt, I finished, unable to pull my eyes away. You like being underestimated, Camille, I thought dully, bringing my hand to touch the edge of the picture. You're fascinated by the way the mind works, the way it breaks, the way people survive things no one should be able to survive. Her skin was tinged a ghastly gray. The whites of her wide-set eyes were marked by blots of red, capillaries that had burst as she'd struggled against her assailant. You struggled. You fought. She was lying on her back on a white marble floor, strawberry blonde hair spread out in a halo around her head. But I knew in my gut that she'd fought, viciously, with an almost feral strength her assailant wouldn't have been expecting. Asphyxiation, Dean commented. She was strangled. Murder weapon? I asked. There was a difference between strangling someone with a wire and strangling them with a rope. Briggs took out a snapshot of an evidence bag. Inside was a necklace, the thick metal chain Camille had worn looped twice around her neck the night before. In my mind, I could see her, sitting at the bar, one leg dangling off the stool. I could see her turning toward us and walking toward the exit. I could see Aaron Shaw watching her go. You'll want to talk to the casino owner's son. Michael's thoughts were perfectly in line with my own. Aaron Shaw. His interest in Miss Holt wasn't professional. What did you see? Briggs asked. Michael shrugged. Attraction, affection, a sharp edge of tension. What kind of tension? I didn't get the chance to follow up before Sloane popped into the kitchen and went to pour herself some coffee. Briggs eyed her warily. Sloane's tendency toward high-speed babbling when caffeinated was a thing of legend. I called you last night, Sloane told him reproachfully. I called, and you didn't answer. Ergo, I get coffee, and you don't get to complain. I thought about the chopsticks Sloane had stolen the night before. You needed Briggs to pick up your call. You needed to be recognized. You needed to be heard. There was another murder, Briggs told Sloane. I know. Sloane stared at the coffee in her hands. 2333. What did you say? Briggs asked sharply. The number on the corpse. It's 2333. Sloane finally came to sit at the table with the rest of us. Isn't it? Briggs pulled a new picture out of the file. Camille's wrist. 2333 had been carved into it. Literally. The bloody numbers were slightly jagged. From a henna tattoo to this. The numbers had always been a message, but this was violent, personal. Was she alive when the unsub did this? I asked. Briggs shook his head. Post-mortem. There was a compact in the victim's purse. We believe the unsub broke it and used one of the shards to carve the numbers in her wrist. I shifted from Camille's perspective to her attackers. You're a planner. If this was what you'd intended all along, you would have brought something with you to do the job. That left me with two questions. First, what had the plan been? And second, why had the unsub deviated from it? What went wrong? I asked the killer silently. Did she thwart your plan somehow? Was she harder to manipulate than the others? I thought about the fact that Camille had been present at the crime scenes for two of the victims. Did you know her? This is personal. Dean's thoughts were exactly in line with my own. The other targets might have been selected for convenience, but not this one. That was Agent Sterling's take as well, Briggs said. He turned back to Sloane. You decoded the numbers? Sloane grabbed a pen out of Agent Briggs's pocket, flipped the folder closed, and started scrawling numbers on the outside of the folder, talking as she wrote. The Fibonacci sequence is a series of integers where each number is derived by adding the 2 that come before it. Most people believe it was discovered by Fibonacci, but the earliest appearances of the sequence are in Sanskrit writings that predate Fibonacci by hundreds of years. Sloane set the pen down. There were 15 numbers on the page. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233, 377. I didn't see it at first, she continued. The pattern picks up mid-integer. Pretend for a moment, Leah told her, that we're all very, very slow. I'm not very good at pretending, Sloane told her seriously. But I think I can do that. Michael choked back a snort. Sloane picked the pen back up and put it down under the number 13. It starts here, she said, underlining 4 numbers, then inserting a slash before repeating the process. 0112358, 13213, 4558, 9144, 2333, 77. 2333. The image of Camille's wrist rose to the surface of my mind, like a drowned man bobbing to the surface of a lake. You break the glass. You press the jagged edge to her flesh, carving in the numbers. Why this sequence? I said. And why make it this hard to see? Why not start at the beginning, with 0112? Because, Dean said slowly, this knowledge has to be earned. Briggs glanced at us, one after the other. Agent Sterling and I will be spending the afternoon talking to potential witnesses. If you have any names to add to that list, besides Aaron Shaw, now would be the time to speak up. At the mention of Aaron's name, Sloane's hands curved tightly around her cup of coffee. Michael cocked his head to the side and stared at her. An instant later, he caught me watching him and raised an eyebrow at me in an unspoken challenge. You know something's up with Sloane, I thought. And you know that I know what it is. I assume you've gathered that Camille was out with Tori Howard last night? Dean asked Briggs. Briggs gave a brief nod. We talked with Tori briefly yesterday. We'll go back for seconds today, then work our way through the rest of our list. I don't suppose you'd like to take me with you when you go to talk to this fine collection of potentially homicidal individuals? Leah batted her eyes at Agent Briggs. Briggs withdrew 4 earpieces from his pocket and laid them down on the table. They were joined, a moment later, by a tablet from his briefcase. Video and audio feeds, he told us. Agent Sterling and I are wired. Within a 4-mile radius, you'll see what we see. You'll hear what we hear. If you pick up on something you think we might have missed, you can text or call. Otherwise, I want you studying up on our interrogation techniques. Leah, Michael, Dean, and I reached for earpieces in unison. Sloane turned to Briggs. What about me? She asked quietly. There were 4 earpieces, and 5 of us. 4 casinos in 4 days, Briggs said. I need you. He put enough emphasis on those words to tell me he'd picked up on the vulnerability in Sloane's tone, to figure out where this killer is going to strike next. You. The roulette wheel spins. The players watch with bated breath. You watch the players. Like ants in an ant farm, they're predictable. Some bet on black, some bet on red. Some are hesitant. Some believe chance favors the bold. You could tell them the exact odds of winning. You could tell them that chance favors no man. Red or black, it doesn't matter. The house always wins. You expel a breath, long and slow. Let them have their fun. Let them believe that Lady Luck might smile down on them. Let them keep their games of chance. Your game, the one they don't even know they're playing, is a game of skill. 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, 1-4. You know what comes next. You know the order. You know the rules. This is bigger than ants in an ant farm could ever imagine. No one can stop you. You are death. You are the house, and the house always wins. Chapter 19. Leah perched on the back of the couch, one leg stretched out along its length, the other dangling over the side. Dean sat on the sofa in front of her, his forearms resting on his knees, staring at the tablet we'd propped up on the coffee table. "Anything yet?" I asked, taking a seat beside him. Dean shook his head. "There." Leah's posture never changed, but her eyes lit up. On the tablet, a shot of a hand dominated the screen as Briggs reoriented the camera masquerading as a pen in his suit pocket. "Michael!" I started to call out. Michael appeared before I could say anything else. "Let me guess," he said, producing a flask and taking a swig. "Showtime." My eyes lingered on the flask. Dean put one hand on my knee. If Leah and I had noticed Michael skating around the edges of the dark place, Dean almost certainly had as well. He'd known Michael for longer than I had, and he was telling me not to press the issue. Without a word, I slipped in the earpiece Agent Briggs had given me and turned my attention back to the video feed. On the screen, we saw what Agent Briggs saw, a stage with massive columns on either side. As he got closer to the stage, I recognized the person standing in front of it, examining the lighting. Tori Howard was wearing a black tank and jeans, her hair pulled into a ponytail that was neither high nor low. No muss, no fuss. She either didn't care about the image she projected, or she went out of her way to project an image centered on that ideal. When she saw Briggs, she wiped her hands on the front of her jeans and met him in the middle aisles. "Agents," she said, "can I help you with something?" Agents, plural, I thought. That meant Sterling was there too, just out of the frame. "We have just a few more questions about last night for you." Briggs seemed to be taking lead on this one, which meant that Sterling had chosen to sit back and watch. Given that she was the profiler, that didn't surprise me. Sterling would want to get Tori's measure before she decided exactly which tack to take. "I already told you," Tori replied to Briggs, a slight edge in her voice. "Camille and I went for drinks. We played a couple of hands of poker, and I called it an early night. Camille was looking for a party. I wasn't. I have a show today, and I like to be on my game." "I understand your shows have been selling out," Agent Briggs said. "Say what you mean, Agent." Tori leveled a look at him, and it was almost like she was aiming that same dry look at us. "My show has been selling out ever since the Wonderland closed theirs down." "Ever since victim number 2 literally went up in flames," I corrected silently. "You seem defensive." Agent Sterling was the one who said those words. I knew her well enough to know that she'd chosen that moment to speak up, and that observation, for a reason. "This is the second time you've interviewed me in the past 12 hours, Tori retorted. "You came to my place of business. I hadn't known Camille for long, but I liked her. So yes, when you come here, purportedly following up on what I told you last night, but also dropping oblique hints about my dead rival, I get a little defensive." "Not just defensive," Michael opined. He didn't volunteer whatever else it was he saw in her face. "I didn't hurt Camille," Tori said plainly. "And I wouldn't have wasted even one of my breaths on Sylvester Wilde. I'm sorry she's dead. I'm not sorry he is. Are we done here?" Leah let out a low whistle. "She's good." "At lying?" I asked, wondering which portion of the statement Tori had just made was untrue. "She hasn't lied yet," Leah said, "but she will. The best liars start by convincing you either that they're straight shooters or that they can't lie. She's going with the former, and like I said, she's very, very good." Tori was a magician. It was easy enough to believe that she was setting the stage so that when the misdirect came, Briggs and Sterling wouldn't see it coming. Agent Sterling changed tactics. "Can you think of anyone who would want to hurt Camille? Anyone who might have a grudge against her?" A flicker of sorrow crossed Tori's face. She pushed back against it. "No muss, no fuss." Camille was the only female likely to advance to the final round in a high-stakes competition dominated by egos and men. She was confident and manipulative, and she liked winning. "You identify with her," I realized as Tori spoke. Camille was also beautiful, borderline famous, and had no problems whatsoever telling people no. Tori continued unflinchingly. There were probably a lot of people who wanted to hurt her. Her tone was so matter-of-fact that I knew. Someone, maybe multiple someones, hurt you. Tori knew what it was like to be seen as weak, and she knew what it was like to be overpowered. I could see why Camille had chosen to spend time with her. If she'd been fictional, Tori Howard was exactly the kind of character Camille Holt would have chosen to play. "Did Camille ever say anything to you about Aaron Shaw?" Agent Briggs switched up the line of questioning again. "Interesting," Michael murmured, leaning closer to the screen and closer to Tori. "Camille and I met at a New Year's party," Tori replied. "We hit it off. We went out for drinks a couple of times. I wasn't exactly her confidant." I glanced back at Leah. She's pelting them with truth again, I thought. "One more question," Agent Sterling said. "You and Camille went to the Majesty last night." "The new sushi restaurant," Tori supplied. More truth, easily verifiable. "Who picked the restaurant?" Sterling asked. Tori shrugged. "She did." Behind me, Leah swung her legs off the couch and stood. "And there we have it," she told us. "That's the lie." Chapter 20. "I'll text Sterling." Dean reached for his phone. There was a good chance Sterling and Briggs might have picked up on the lie, but they'd want confirmation from Leah. "Anything to add?" Dean asked as he began typing. By some miracle, Michael managed to stifle his long-held tendency to answer everything Dean said with a smart-mouthed barb. "Two things," Michael said. "First, defensiveness isn't an emotion. It's a combination of emotions that plays out in different ways in different people at different times. In this case, we've got a tantalizing cocktail of anger and self-presentation and guilt." Tori feels guilty. I tried to reconcile that with what I knew about her. She struck me as pragmatic. Like Camille, she'd risen to the top of a male-dominated field. To have her own show in Vegas, she'd have to be ambitious. She didn't strike me as a person who would let herself feel bad about anything for long. "And the second thing?" Dean asked. "Her reaction to Aaron Shaw." I beat Michael to the punchline. Michael inclined his head slightly. "Temporary freezing of the facial muscles, brows fighting the urge to draw together, lips just barely stretching themselves back." He shifted his flask rhythmically from one hand to the other and back again, then clarified. "Fear." "What are you scared of, Tori? Why did you skirt the question when Briggs and Sterling asked you if Camille had said anything about Aaron Shaw?" My mind went to what I knew about Sloane's half-brother. He'd grown up in a family where wealth and power were givens. I was betting he'd been raised to follow in his father's footsteps. It wouldn't be hard for someone like that to get used to blurring moral lines. But there had also been something gentle about the way he'd interacted with Sloane, and that something gave me pause. "Is it you Tori's scared of?" I thought, picturing Aaron in my mind. "Or is it your father?" Dean sent the text. A moment later, we heard Agent Sterling excuse herself from the interrogation. Dean got a text back less than a minute later. "Anything else?" he read out loud. "Cassie?" The fact that Agent Sterling had directed that question to me told me that she was looking for something specific, a confirmation of her own hunch, or some aspect of Tori's personality that I would be more likely to pick up on than Dean. "I'm not sure," I said quietly, "but we might be looking at a history of assault. Verbal, physical, sexual, or maybe just the ongoing threat thereof." Saying those words felt like violating a confidence. Michael must have heard that in my voice, because he leaned over Dean and passed me the flask. I raised an eyebrow at him. He shrugged. "I can't help you." The increase in volume drew my attention back to the tablet. Clearly, Tori had reached a breaking point. "If you have any more questions, you can address them to my attorney." "Everything okay here?" Sterling re-entered the conversation, stepping into the frame. Briggs cleared his throat. "I was just asking Miss Howard if anyone could verify her whereabouts after she parted ways with Miss Holt." And she asked for her attorney. Briggs let the second half of that statement go unsaid. "She doesn't trust people in power," I told him silently, "and she certainly doesn't trust you." "I can." A male voice carried over the microphone several seconds before its owner appeared on screen, stepping directly between the FBI agents and Tori. Male. Young. Early 20s at most. My brain started cataloging his demographics before my mind recognized his face. "Bo Donovan," Dean said. "One of our persons of interest. The 21-year-old dishwasher who won the amateur spot at the poker tournament." "Tori was with me," Bo was saying on screen. "Last night, after she and Camille parted ways, Tori was with me." "Funny story," Leah Mock whispered. "She totally wasn't." "You're lying." That alone was enough for Bo to command my full attention. He was about the same height as Tori, but he stood slightly in front of her. Protective. "You and Bo were together last night?" Agent Briggs pressed Tori. "That's right," Tori said, staring down the agents. "We were." "She really is good," Leah commented. "Even I might not have pegged that one for a lie." "And how do you two know each other?" Sterling asked. Bo shrugged, looking for a moment like the kid slumped in the back of the classroom, barely paying attention to what was said at the front. "She's my sister." There was a beat of silence. "Your sister," Agent Sterling repeated. "Foster sister." Tori was the one who supplied that information. She was older than Bo by 2 years, maybe 3. Something told me the protectiveness ran both ways. "You still need help with fixing the lights?" Bo asked Tori, as if the FBI wasn't even standing in the room. "Or what?" "Mr. Donovan," Agent Sterling said, forcing his attention back to her. "Would you mind if we asked you a few questions?" "Knock yourself out." Tori isn't the only one who's not overly fond of people with power. "I understand you've advanced to the finals of the Vegas multi-casino poker tournament," Agent Sterling said. "You're getting quite a bit of attention." "Everyone likes an underdog story." Bo shrugged again. "I'm thinking of selling the rights to Hollywood," he deadpanned. "It'll be one of those really inspirational stories." "Bo," Tori said, a warning note creeping into her voice. "Just answer the questions." Interesting. She didn't want him to aggravate the authorities. For a split second, I felt like I was watching some alternate universe version of Leah and Dean, where she was the older one, and he had Michael's mouth. "Fine," Bo told Tori. Then he turned back to Agent Sterling. "What do you want to know?" "How long have you been playing poker?" "A while." "You must be good at it." "Better than some." "What's your secret?" "Most people are crappy liars." Bo let that sink in. "And for a high school dropout, I'm pretty good at math. I saw Sterling filing those words away for future reference, and I did the same. Agent Briggs took over the questioning. Were you at the New Year's Eve party on the roof at the Apex? Yeah, Bo said. Thought I'd see how the other half lives. Did you know Camille Holt? Agent Sterling asked. I did. She was a nice girl, Bo replied. Lie, Leah sing-songed. Well, Bo amended, as if he'd heard Leah. Camille was nice to me. We were the outsiders in the inner circle. She was a chick. I'm a dishwasher. He managed a small, crooked smile. A girl like that? She wouldn't normally give a guy like me 2 seconds. But once I joined the tournament, she went out of her way to make me feel welcome. She was trying to figure you out. I recognized Agent Sterling's statement for what it was. An attempt to see how Bo dealt with rejection. Tell him Camille was only nice to him because she was manipulating him. See what happens. Bo shrugged. Of course she was. A swing and a miss, Michael said under his breath. In other words, Sterling's words hadn't gotten a rise out of her target. At all. Camille was competitive, Bo said. I respected that. Besides, she decided pretty early on that I wasn't the one she needed to worry about. Agent Sterling cocked her head to the side. And who was Camille worried about? Bo and Tori both answered the question, and they both said the exact same thing. Thomas Wesley. Chapter 21. While Briggs and Sterling went to track down Thomas Wesley, the rest of us were left to entertain ourselves. Michael took out his earpiece and tossed it onto the carpet with no more care than one might use to throw away a crumpled napkin. Call me when the show's back on, he said, reclaiming his flask and heading for his room. Leah shot me a look that said, I told you we were at issue capacity. See? Yes, I thought, watching Michael go. I do. I'll go check on Sloane, I said. Michael wouldn't want my concern. Sloane, at least, might be glad for the company. When I got to our room, I was greeted by the sound of upbeat techno music. I opened the door, half expecting Sloane to be wearing goggles and on the verge of blowing something up. It helps me think, Sloane had explained to me once, like explosives were an alternative form of meditation. Luckily, however, in the absence of her basement lab, she'd taken a different, and less explosive, tack. She was lying upside down on the bed, the upper half of her body hanging over the end. Blueprints, schematics, and hand-drawn maps lay 3 deep, covering the floor around her. 13 hours! Sloane yelled the words over the music, still hanging upside down. I went to turn the music down, and she continued, her voice softer, more vulnerable. If our unsub is killing 1 a day, we have a maximum of 13 hours until he kills again. Briggs had told Sloane that he needed her to figure out where the unsub would strike next. She had clearly taken that request to heart. You want to be needed. You want to be useful. You want to matter, even a little. I tiptoed around the papers and lay down on the bed next to Sloane. Hanging upside down, side by side, we turned to look at each other. You can do this, I told her. And even if you can't, we'll love you just the same. There was a beat of silence. She was wearing a dress, Sloane whispered after a moment. The little girl. She shook her head slightly, then picked up a pen and began marking off distances on one of her maps, as easily as if the whole thing were right side up. My chest tightened. The grip Sloane had on the pen told me that even sinking herself into a project like this one wasn't enough to burn from her mind the memory of the doting father and his little girl. She was wearing a white dress. Sloane's voice was very small. It was clean. Did you notice? No, I said softly. Children stain white clothes within an hour of putting them on, at least 74% of the time. Sloane rattled off. But not her. She didn't ruin it. The way Sloane said the word ruin told me that she wasn't just talking about children staining their clothing. She was talking about herself. And clothing was just the tip of the iceberg. Sloane. He brought her to the bar to get a cherry. Her hand stilled, and she turned to look at me again. He brought me cherries, she said. Just once. Sloane could have told me the number of cherries, the exact day and time, the number of hours that had passed since. I could see that information repeating itself over and over again in her head. Does it help if I hate him for you? I asked. Him, as in her father. Should it? Sloane asked, wrinkling her forehead and sitting up. I don't hate him. I think that maybe, someday, when I'm older, he could not hate me. When you're older and better and normal and good, my brain filled in. Sloane had told me once that she said and did the wrong thing over 84% of the time. The fact that her biological father had played a role in teaching her that lesson, the fact that she still hoped that he might develop even the barest hint of affection for her someday, if only she could do things right, physically hurt me. I sat up and latched my arms around her. Sloane leaned into the hug and rested her head on my shoulder for a few seconds. Don't tell anyone, she said, about the cherries. I won't. She waited a moment longer, then pulled back. Al Capone once donated a pair of cherry trees to a hospital as thanks for treating his syphilis. With those memorable words, Sloane lay back down, hanging upside down off the end of the bed, and staring out at the maps and schematics she'd collected. If you don't leave, she warned me, there's a high probability that I'm going to tell you some statistics about syphilis. I rolled off the bed. So noted. Back in the living room, Michael had apparently seen fit to return. For reasons I could not begin to fathom, he and Leah were arm wrestling. What? I started to say, but before I could finish, Dean spoke up. Show's back on, he said. Leah took advantage of Michael's distraction and slammed his hand down. I win. Before Michael could complain, she resumed her spot on the back of the couch. I sat next to Dean. Michael stared at us for a second or two, then picked his earpiece up off the floor and went to stand behind Leah. On screen, I saw a hand, probably Briggs's, reach out and knock on a hotel room door. I fit my earpiece back into my ear, just in time to hear Thomas Wesley's assistant answer the door. May I help you? Agents Sterling and Briggs, I heard Sterling say from off-screen. FBI, we'd like a word with Mr. Wesley. I'm afraid Mr. Wesley isn't available at the moment, the assistant said. The look on Leah's face called BS on that one. I would be happy to pass along a message or to put you in touch with Mr. Wesley's legal counsel. If we could just have a few minutes of Mr. Wesley's time, Briggs tried again. I'm afraid that's impossible. The assistant smiled daggers at Briggs. It's fine, James, a voice called. A second later, Thomas Wesley appeared on screen. His salt and pepper hair was slightly mussed. He was wearing a teal silk robe and very little else. Agent Sterling, Agent Briggs. Wesley greeted them each with a nod, like a monarch graciously acknowledging his subjects. What can I do for you? We have just a few questions, Agent Sterling said, concerning your relationship with Camille Holt. Of course. Mr. Wesley, the assistant, James, said, his voice tinged with displeasure. You are under no obligation to answer any questions I do not want to answer, Wesley finished. I know. It just so happens I want to answer the agent's questions, and, he said, turning his attention back toward the screen, I'm a man who's used to doing what he wants. I had the oddest sensation then that he was addressing those words less to Agent Briggs than to the camera. You switched hotels, Agent Briggs said, dragging the man's gaze up. Why? A benign question whose sole purpose was to keep the man from looking too closely at the pen in Agent Briggs's pocket. Bad juju at the other one, Wesley replied. What, with that whole murder business? His tone sounded flippant, but Michael filled in the blanks. He's more disturbed than he wants to let on. You do realize, Agent Sterling replied to Wesley, that there was also a murder here at the Desert Rose? Wesley said glibly. He shrugged. 4 bodies in 4 days at 4 different casinos. Given the choice between staying at a 5th casino on day 5 and staying at one of the 4, I decided I liked my odds better at the latter. You always play the odds, I thought, studying Wesley. And based on your background in business, you usually win. Can we come in? Sterling was the one who asked that question. She must have been playing the odds herself, specifically that Wesley, a self-professed womanizer, was less likely to turn down a request from a female agent. Mr. Wesley actually has several commitments this morning, the assistant started to say. James, go organize the liquor cabinet, Wesley ordered lazily. Alphabetically, this time. With one last dark look at the agents, Wesley's assistant did as he was bidden. Wesley opened the door to his suite wider and gestured. Please, he said, do come in. I have an excellent view of the pool. 3 seconds later, Briggs and Sterling were inside the suite. I heard the door shut behind them, and then the feed went black. Chapter 22. The sound of static was deafening in my ear. I jerked out my earpiece. The others did the same. What the? When it came to swearing, Leah was both creative and verbally precise. She hit several buttons on the tablet. Nothing. Dean stood. They're either out of range or something's blocking the signal. Given that Thomas Wesley's most recent startup had specialized in security tech, I was betting on the latter. I tried to text Sterling, but the message came back as undeliverable. Cell signal is blocked too, I reported. You know, Michael said, a spark in his eye. I'm feeling like a bit of a stroll, possibly in the direction of the Desert Rose. No, Dean said flatly. Sterling and Briggs can handle Thomas Wesley, with or without us. Leah twirled her ponytail contemplatively around her index finger. Judd went to grab food, she commented, and I did hear that the Desert Rose has the world's largest indoor swimming pool. Leah, Dean gritted out, we're staying here. Of course we are, Leah told him, patting his shoulder. And I am in no way planning to go no matter what you say, because I always do what I'm told. Goodness knows I have no real attachment to making my own decisions. She gushed. Especially when the person issuing orders is you. We went to the pool. Sloane chose to stay in the suite. Given how much she hated being left out, I took that to mean that she hated the idea of not delivering the answer Briggs had asked for more. Not bad, Leah announced, lying back on a lounge chair and casting her face toward the artificial sky. The Desert Rose's massive indoor swimming complex was bustling, both with families and with those who'd cordoned themselves off in the adults-only area, despite the fact that it wasn't even noon. Dean gave Leah a much-abused look, but said nothing as he scanned the area for threats. I claimed the lounge chair next to Leah's. Thomas Wesley had said that his suite had a lovely view of the pool. I eyed the balconies with pool access, and my hand went to the earpiece hidden beneath my hair. I'd turned the volume down so that the static wasn't so deafening, but static was still the only thing I got. "You're frustrated." I looked up to see Michael staring at me. He claimed the chair on the other side of Leah. His hands went to the bottom of his shirt, like he was about to take it off. Then he aborted the motion, running one hand through his hair and allowing the other to dangle over the side of the chair. He looked perfectly at ease, perfectly relaxed. It took everything I had not to picture the bruises on his stomach and chest. "Don't look at me like that," Michael said quietly. "Not you, Cassie." I wondered what, exactly, he'd seen on my face. Was it my eyes or my lips or the tension in my neck that gave me away? "He knows that I know why he can't take his shirt off." "Like what?" I said, forcing myself to lean back and close my eyes. Michael was an expert at pretending that things and people didn't matter. I wasn't quite so adept, but I wasn't going to force him to talk about this with me. "We don't talk about much of anything anymore." Michael cleared his throat. "Well, this could get interesting." I cracked my eyes open. Michael nodded toward the adults-only area of the pool. "Daniel De La Cruz, the professor. Person of interest number 2. I recognized the man a second before Leah did. After a moment's consideration, she rolled off her lounge chair, tossing her long ponytail over her shoulder. As Leah strolled over and ducked under the rope, and Dean grumbled something that sounded suspiciously like "bad idea" under his breath, I went back over what I knew about Daniel De La Cruz. Intense. Perfectionist. And yet, there he was, holding a drink well before noon. "You're not drinking it," I realized after watching De La Cruz for a moment. This was a man who knew exactly how he was perceived. And exactly how to manipulate that perception. He made eye contact with a nearby woman. She smiled. "To you, everything is an algorithm. Everything can be predicted." I couldn't pinpoint what precisely gave me that impression. The fit of his swimsuit? The attentiveness behind his eyes? "You have a PhD in mathematics. What kind of professor plays professional poker on the side?" Before I could reason my way to any answers, Leah bumped into De La Cruz. He caught his drink an instant before he spilled it on her. Good reflexes. Beside me, I could practically hear Dean gritting his teeth. "She'll be fine," I murmured, even as I thought about our unsub, the Fibonacci sequence, the care with which the first 2 murders had been planned. "She's going to be fine," Dean muttered. "I'm going to have a heart attack." "What did I say, Jonathan?" A sharp voice cut into my thoughts. To my left, a man with perfect hair and a face riddled with barely masked displeasure stalked over to a little boy of maybe 7 or 8. Whatever the boy said to him in response, the man didn't like it. He took another step toward the child. Beside me, Michael's entire body tensed. A moment later, he was so relaxed that I wondered if I'd imagined it. He climbed lazily to his feet, brushing a speck of invisible dust from his shirt as he began weaving his way closer to the man and the boy. "Dean," I said urgently. Dean was already on his feet. "I'll keep an eye on Leah," I told him. "Go." Michael settled at a table adjacent to the boy and his father. He smiled pleasantly, staring out at the pool, but I knew better than to think the positioning was coincidental. Michael had learned to read emotions as a defense mechanism against his seemingly perfect father's volatile moods. Anger was the emotion that most set him on edge, but the kind of anger that hid behind masks, in the middle of seemingly perfect little families, that wasn't just a trigger. It was a ticking bomb. Dean took a seat at the table Michael had claimed. Michael propped his feet up on the spare chair, like he hadn't a care in the world. True to my promise to Dean, I forced my attention back to Leah and the professor. You seem to be quite knowledgeable about the state of our investigation. It took me a moment to realize that the audio had clicked back on in my earpiece. Briggs's voice was clear, but the reply was muffled. Angling my head down and letting my hair fall into my face, I adjusted the volume. My business to know. The first girl died at my party, and Camille was a friend of sorts. For a man in my position, it pays to keep track of one's friends. I scanned the surrounding balconies. There, toward the top of the dome, I could make out 3 figures. 2 of them were wearing suits. Sterling and Briggs. I wasn't the only one who'd noticed them. Across the pool, the professor had locked eyes on Wesley and the agents as well. You notice things, Professor. You pride yourself on it. I caught Leah's attention and held her gaze for a second. She said something to De La Cruz, then headed back toward me. In a fluid, choreographed motion, she pulled the ponytail holder from her hair, letting her jet-black tresses cascade down her back. As she took a seat beside me, she fit her own earpiece back into place. I don't suppose you could be persuaded to part with the source of your knowledge on Camille's case? Agent Sterling asked. It was odd to be hearing her voice when I could only make out her silhouette on the balcony. Most likely not, Wesley replied smoothly. However, James would be happy to furnish you with my alibis for each of the past 4 evenings. Leah's expression eloquently communicated her skepticism that Assistant James would be at all happy to assist the FBI in any way. I turned to try to get the boys' attention, but neither Michael nor Dean was at the table where the 2 of them had been sitting a moment before. Neither, I realized upon looking, were the young boy and his father. As I scanned the crowd, Agent Sterling's voice provided the soundtrack. You're an intelligent man, she was telling Wesley, playing to his ego. What do you think happened to Camille Holt? I finally saw Michael, leaning against the side of a camel-themed snack bar. A few feet away, the young boy and his father reached the front of the line. I looked for Dean and found him caught behind a massive crowd of 40-something women, trying to make his way through them to Michael. What do I think? Wesley was saying over the audio feed. I think that were I in your shoes, I'd be particularly interested in Tori Howard's rather unique skill set. A few feet away from Michael, the young boy reached up for an ice cream cone. He smiled up at his father. His father smiled back. I breathed an internal sigh of relief. Dean finally made his way through the crowd and began to close in on Michael. At that instant, 2 things happened. On the audio feed, Agent Briggs asked Thomas Wesley to clarify his comment about Tori's skill set, and near the snack bar, the little boy stumbled and the ice cream fell from his cone and onto the ground. The world fell into slow motion for me as the boy froze. The father made a grab for his son, his hand locking around the boy's arm as he jerked him roughly to the side. Michael exploded forward. 1 second, he was a foot or 2 away from Dean, and the next, he was ripping the father's hand away from his son and throwing his body into a punch aimed at the man's face. I'm surprised you don't know. Wesley's voice broke through my horror. Tori Howard is a decent magician, but her real talent is hypnosis.